Thanks. Voilà. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all, wherever you are connected from. We are speaking from the European Crisis Management Laboratory of the European Commission Joint Research Center premises in Italy. I am Marzia Santini, and today, together with my colleague Ludovica de Girolamo, we will present you the activities of this laboratory about the analysis and monitoring of complex crises and conflict hotspots. The focus will be on the use we make of the open source intelligence for monitoring and mapping such kind of situations. The aim of this session is therefore to describe the challenges we face when using OSINT by providing some concrete examples. I will quickly introduce our broader work environment, and then we will move on to the technical details with Ludovica. Our laboratory, highlighted in blue on the right-hand side of the screen, is one of the three pillars of our disaster risk management unit at JRC. We are about 120 scientists working on all phases of disaster risk management cycle to inform the European Commission policy making in various sectors. The Disaster Risk Management Knowledge Center performs a constant horizon scanning of the DRM knowledge base to identify gaps and integrate available scientific knowledge to be shared in a digestible format with decision makers. The operational service called Copernicus, active 24/7, provide early warning systems and rapid mapping derived from Earth observation data to the requesting authorized users. And finally, this laboratory experiments methodologies and approaches to solve new and old disaster risk management related challenges. We perform scientific analysis for natural, man-made, and complex crises at global level. We do this via a daily monitoring activity performed by subject matter experts. And our reaction times can be minutes in the case when the impact assessment is performed via automatic systems that we design and manage, like GDAX, for example, the Global Disaster Alert and Coordination System, or a few days maximum. Our main stakeholders are the policy directorate generals of the European Commission, like the one for civil protection and humanitarian aid, or the European External Action Service, as well as other players beyond the EU, like the UN Agency for Humanitarian Aid. This is a selection of the main events we analyzed in these first 10 months of 2023. I would say it's a good mix of various types of events, including conflicts and cascading migration trends. Our analyses are provided in the form of web platforms, scientific reports, and maps. Some of these analyses are publicly available, but those we produce for conflict and complex crisis monitoring are for the exclusive use of the European External Action Service and the foreign policy instruments of the European Commission. Therefore, will not be shared in this presentation. Now, I think it's time to go in the meat and bones of this presentation with my colleague Ludovica de Girolamo, who will provide details of the activities and also some concrete examples of our experience with mapping crisis and conflict context using OSINT. So, Ludovica, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Okay, here we are. Apologies. Thank you, Marzia, and thank you for the introduction. I am Ludovica de Girolamo. I am a conflict and geospatial analyst at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. So as Marzia has introduced, the European Crisis Management Laboratory, among other events, daily monitors and analyzes worldwide crises in the area characterized by endemic instability. Our crisis and security mapping and monitoring products support policymakers in crisis preparedness and response. They bring added value to context analysis, operational activities, and information products of the European External Action Service and the foreign policy instruments of the European Commission. while at the same time aiming at enhancing situational awareness by identifying emerging dynamics and trends. The map in this slide shows the geographic extent that our products cover. So far in 2023, we have produced almost 300 maps, a bit more than those mentioned in the slide. Most of these are regular monitoring products for ongoing crises and conflicts. For instance, Ukraine, Yemen, and the migration crisis. These are useful to identify medium to long-term trends and dynamics. But many of these maps are also ad hoc, urgent maps that are produced at the outbreak of a crisis, often on a very short notice and a very tight deadline, Israel and Gaza to mention the latest. Our activities and products are meant to have an impact on policy in terms of crisis prevention and preparedness, while also having a strong operational dimension for crisis response. The maps in particular can help grasp the geospatial component of a particular situation. They are used in European Commission reports, briefing, crisis meetings, as well as being supporting material for foreign policy operations, field visits of EU officials to third countries. This is why they are very complex, full of information and content. They rely both on official and open source data to produce actionable intelligence. So here we come to the main topic of this session, the use of OSINT for crisis and conflict. When applied to this field, relying on OSINT data is often a necessity because not always official data is readily available during or in the immediate aftermath of a crisis. And even if official and public data is available, it might not be complete or timely enough to gain a comprehensive overview, especially when we deal with early stages of a crisis or a conflict like we often do. Most of the challenges that we are going to mention in this session are somehow related to data gaps. First and foremost, it's the overall lack of information in conflict and crisis areas, both from official and government bodies, and in some cases also from open source. This stops with the lack of accurate and precise information, which is difficult to verify when covering events in real time. When we retrieve data, it is often from multiple sources. On one hand, they complement each other in terms of the information provided. On the other, they do not necessarily match. Additionally, the structure of the data that we collect is most of the time heterogeneous. Therefore, it requires extensive data processing, especially from a mapping and geospatial point of view. All these aspects actually overlap with one another. We tried to divide them broadly in 4 categories for the scope of this session: availability, quality, consistency, and usability. For each category, we will provide an example based on our experience and knowledge. And the disclaimer is always to keep in mind that these topics and issues raised are not at all exhaustive, but merely good examples, in our opinion. As a first example, we picked the case of the earthquake in Syria and Turkey last February to show how the different contextual background between the 2 countries affected the information actually available. These are the relief web pages for the 2 countries on 6th of February, same day of the first earthquake. Turkey on the left, Syria on the right. You can see that the amount of available information for Turkey was almost double compared to Syria, which is still ongoing, which is still experiencing an ongoing civil war. In the first phases, in the first days, we could rely on timely updates provided by AFAD for Turkey. AFAD is a Turkish governmental disaster management agency. By contrast, for Syria, we had to piece together information from social media. And this holds even more true in the case of opposition-held areas in Idlib that were the most affected by the earthquake. Most of our activities entail monitoring of events that are unfolding in real time, which makes it hard to collect and verify information. It is essential that the data that we collect is verified in terms of the sources used. They need to be both reliable and free of bias, and then the information is always validated through a process of data triangulation. At the same time, the quality of the data on a specific event depends on the extent of its coverage, that in turn is linked primarily to the disruption of internet and telecommunication access, and also on the public and political focus. These two frames on the right displayed the day after a war broke out in each of the two countries, Ethiopia on the left and Ukraine on the right, on LiveUMap. LiveUMap is an interactive platform that extracts information on security incidents and conflicts through social media. You can see that there is a very sharp contrast between the two, between the coverage of the two. It is, in this case, related both to a discrepancy in public and political attention, and also the fact that in Tigray, the Ethiopian region in which the war erupted, all forms of communication were cut off. In such case, it is then crucial to dig in for more information, especially at a local level and from local news outlets. By contrast, in Ukraine, the Starlink satellite internet service ensured continuous access during all stages of the war, including the very early phases. In addition to conflicts and security threats, we have been monitoring migration trends to the EU for years. We keep track of all the main migration routes to Europe, as well as having a map that encompasses all the relevant data to get an overview of the situation in terms of arrivals to European countries, both countries of first arrivals and other countries in the EU, the presence of migrants, the countries of origin, etc. In order to do so, we rely on data from international organizations and also from EU member states' ministries of interior. These comprehensive tools are absolutely indispensable in collecting ground data that we could not get otherwise. But they often present similar data entries, but with different values. For example, the number of arrivals in Spain differs between IOM and UNHCR. So putting together all the information, all the data from several sources in a way that is consistent can be quite challenging. The last example will focus on data usability from a GIS perspective. Mapping country borders is not always straightforward. There are many political implications regarding contested borders, disputed areas, and also we need to always consider a polarized account of events. Not always we are able to retrieve ready-to-map data. Most often we need to undergo a process of geolocation. In this case, we rely on satellite imagery, web mapping services such as OSM. You can see here a map on Khartoum from OSM to identify points of interest, the location of events, as well as critical infrastructures. For instance, we recently found ourselves geolocating minor yet important dams in Ukraine, for which we were not able to find an existing layer. Finally, when we work on global datasets like border crossings or key infrastructures such as airports, we use datasets from several sources and we triangulate among them to get the most comprehensive dataset possible, often integrating with our own data. Just to give a concrete example, we are working on a global data set on border crossings, for which we are using and combining data from WFP, UNHCR, and OSM, as well as verifying the status of specific border crossings to make sure that the information is up to date. To wrap up this session, during this session, we have focused on 4 challenges that we face on a daily basis when using OSINT: availability, quality, consistency, and usability. For each, we have provided examples based on our daily work. As you might have noticed, many of these examples actually fall also in other categories because, as previously mentioned, they overlap with one another. For instance, heterogeneous data also affect consistency, and similarly, mapping a conflict area is affected both by the availability, the general availability of data in a crisis context, but also by the coverage of the crisis itself. So there is no simple solution. We struggle with this every day. In some cases, we have provided here an insight on how, in our experience, we try to overcome these challenges. Most of it relies on a process of verification of the data, its triangulation together with subject matter expertise and deep contextual knowledge. And here I would give the floor back to Marzia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ludovica. I hope this was somehow interesting for you. I don't know if there are already questions or comments on the presentation. If so, please raise your hand or just unmute your speaker and jump in. Do we have questions in the chat? Let me check. Not for the moment, and nor I see any hands raised. Am I right? Yeah, seems so. Okay.
I will share. I will then perhaps share my screen. We have prepared a Slido. Our colleague Ivano also put it in the chat. No, I cannot share my screen. Share. No, I cannot share my screen. Share. Yeah. Bye.
Okay. So apologies, we are coordinating among each other with microphones on and off. Apparently, okay, now it's good. So if you want, we just put in the chat a link to a very quick Slido poll. We organized 3 questions, and we would like to trigger some sort of exchange, visualizing it on the screen, and Ludovica will do so as soon as possible. And together with us in the European Crisis Management Laboratory, we also have the other analysts of the team, to whom I ask to open their camera. So Ivano Caravaggi, Azzurra Lentini, and Anna Maria Duta, so that here is the team at work, and we're ready for receiving your questions and comments on the presentation. If you have any observation, we maybe forgot mentioning some challenges, or you have an opinion on the use of OSINT for mapping such kind of contexts. And in the meantime, we will see if, okay, so can we have it projected maybe and shared on the screen? Colleagues are, okay, then I will open it myself and follow the. Okay. Can you see already some replies? If you do so, while I get organized, you can start commenting, Ludovica, and I will close my microphone.
Okay, there is a question. Perhaps it is a little intrusive, but I did not see the materials that you worked on the Turkish air attack on northeastern Syria. Are you not working there?
Sorry again, can you read it aloud?
The question is, perhaps it is a little intrusive, but I did not see in the materials that you worked on the Turkish air attack on northeastern Syria. Are you not working there? Yes, we are working there. We are not able to show specific maps and products that we produce. This is why we focus more on a methodology point of view. But we have focused on the Turkish air attacks in northern Syria. We actually do quite often. We have just in these cases brought some examples of the topics that we cover. There is, a question. Just go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. It's so helpful. I have two questions actually. One is that I know you briefly touched on the issue of inconsistency like between different data sets, but I didn't really catch like how you resolve it. Like that's also one of the main challenges that I like face like on my day-to-day job. So I would like to know like if you have any like tips and tricks on that. And the second thing is, I saw that you worked on the immigration route and that kind of data as well, but do you happen to have any like insight or info on how to separate like refugees versus like non-refugee like migrants? Because that's one of the data sets that I've been always having hard time getting.
Okay, thank you. I will redirect the question to our colleague Ana Maria, who is here. So,
hello, everybody. Thank you for the question. It's indeed very challenging, and it's something that we deal with on a weekly basis. What we do, as Ludovica mentioned in her presentation, so we map weekly the migration routes and how many people came to Europe, and we actually use all these sources. When we are trying to do comparisons, we are looking for the source who is more comprehensive for that particular problem. So, for example, if one country is represented more in UNHCR than in IOM, then we use UNHCR. So we are trying to work it out like that. And of course, when we use multiple sources, we always mention which is the source, which is the time frame that we are considering. Like that, there's no possibility of misunderstanding. Like if somebody is looking at the map, it's not comparing plums and apples. What was the saying? Something like that. No, so. But it's indeed very challenging. The second question, refugees and migrants. Normally here, that's we count on the data sources. So if we use the data of UNHCR and UNHCR mentions that there are, I don't know, 10,000 new refugees, we just use that. So we don't have the capacity to do any type of verification, unfortunately. So we have to use sources as they come. We cannot really distinguish between them. I don't know if there's something that you want to add. Yes, yes.
I just will add something on the migrants and refugees. As Anna said, it is very difficult to make a difference between the two. In our data sets, for the countries of first arrivals, so for the arrivals in Europe, we do not have this data also because migrants need to go through all the process and then, yeah. But we do have this for the presence of migrants. We do have this for the presence of migrants from UNHCR, for instance, in the Western Balkans. So we do have this difference. As there is another question, I will just read it aloud. You mentioned the aim of the reporting is to support policy and decision making. How do you make sure that the data is integrated into these policy processes within you, and what tools have helped you in this regard? And I think I will give the floor to Marzia.
Yes, hello, thank you for the question. First of all, is a way of working, meaning that we have, if not daily, for sure, weekly contacts with the situation room of the European External Action Service and the other, similar operations room that we work with. And this is an exchange that is an open channel. And of course, for critical situations like the outbreak of the current situation in Israel, this is something that is continuous. In a more structured way, we can say that our inputs and, for example, our maps are used to enrich the reporting that is done through the so-called IPCR, which is the Integrated Political Crisis Response Mechanism of the European Commission, where basically the political response of the EU member states is kind of agreed with respect to crisis that the EU wants to tackle in a harmonized, unified way. So more or less, this is the way we provide these inputs to the situations and operations room of these stakeholders, like the European External Action Service and the foreign policy instruments of the European Commission. And from there, they make use of it in their reporting, in their decision-making tables together with the member states and other key players. I don't know if this is a sufficient reply to your question, TA. Tamara, please let me know.
Is there any other question?
Have you ever
can also
the success of this integration?
Okay, I will mute myself.
Yeah, this is a question related to what we call the feedback loop. And it's very crucial indeed. We try to collect evidences of the impact of our analysis. It's a difficult process that we try to reinforce over time with our main stakeholders that we mentioned, the External Action Service, FBI, and sometimes also the Directorate General for Humanitarian and Civil Protection or the United Nations agencies dealing with humanitarian aid, depending on the type of crisis we're talking about. The feedback loop is a challenge indeed. We try to have these periodic meetings with these stakeholders, asking them to map the route of the map. So where our maps are ending up in their products, who's making use of them and for what. This is something that we try to do all the time, but it's not always easy because, there are other priorities and time pressure on the shoulders of everyone. And so this sort of lessons identified and lessons learned and measurement of the impact is a bit difficult. what we can say is that our stakeholders are appreciating and asking more and more these types of visual analysis, as I call the maps, because they're not only maps, they're an assessment and analysis product. And that is a sign for sure of the usefulness, I believe, of these products. But if you want to refer to a specific quantitative / qualitative way of measuring the impact, it's not there yet. We need to work on that. Okay, I'm looking at the watch. I think we reached the end of this session. Thank you for your participation and your stimulating questions. It is indeed something that we value and treasure very much, because what we would like is to, keep this network of fellow practitioners and analysts, as we believe that exchanging practices and workarounds, the challenges, would be very valuable to us. So I hope this session was of use for you, and will also be the beginning of a new future, exchange of experiences. And thank you for the New York University to host us with this session, for hosting us with this session from the European Crisis Management Laboratory.
Thanks, bye.